Hello and welcome back to All Things Money. I'm your host, David Blain. Thank you for joining us today. We've got a great show. Today's October 1st. I may touch on the Healthcare Reform Act, but I know you're getting a lot of information on that. We want to make sure that you get the facts. So maybe we'll devote an entire show to it. We may touch on it later, but right now we're talking about investment noise and how to deal with it. There's a good book out there called Before Happiness. And it's written by a guy by the name of Shawn Achor. And he works at Harvard. He's a Harvard educator. We won't hold that against him. But anyway, it's a great book. And he talks about the link, and I alluded to this in the first segment, the link between getting rid of irrelevant information in your life and the increased likelihood of being able to reach a goal and therefore becoming more happy. And today, we're overwhelmed with so much information. You know, it comes in the computer and the phone and the tablet and the TV and all these different sources of information that people become overloaded and they don't know what to do with all this information. And because of some of the hardwire in our brain, we tend to look for the negative information in the news, and it affects us. And what we found, or what Achor has found, is that we listen for bad news 3 times as hard as we listen for good news. And so that makes it appear that bad news overwhelms the good news, which just isn't true in reality. I mean, just look at your evening news. And let's say you live in a place like Craven County where we live. You know, there's about 100 and some, maybe 100,000 people there. And if one person was killed in Craven County, I mean, that's going to be headline news. You know, but they don't talk about the other, 99,999 that woke up that day and were not murdered. And so people tend to focus on the negative news. And this gentleman, Mr. Achor, he has a theory that if we could even stop 5% of the negative noise or the irrelevant information, that our lives will be much, much better. So when it comes to investment information, as this information comes in, we want to start asking questions. Number one is it usable? And I sit on the investment committee over at Carolina East Health Systems, and we have a consultant, so I kind of get to sit on the other side of the table. And I tell you, that's a great experience being an advisor to clients. And on this side of the table, we hire a consultant. I mean, I do my own investing, so as a person, I don't have that experience, but at the health system, I do, because we hire a consultant. They come in and they give us reports on their investments and that sort of thing. And it's a really unique place. And they come in every quarter and they start going through this economic review and what's happening here and what's going over here. And, I asked them, I said, what are we going to do? What are we going to do with this information? You come in and you go on for 30 minutes about interest rates or whatever. What are we going to do? Are we going to change our investment policy? Does it really matter, what's going on, that a cut in an attack in Syria may cut the flow of oil in the Suez Canal or whatever? I mean, are we going to change our whole investment outlook because of that? Well, the answer is no. Then we don't need to process that information, at least as it relates to your investment portfolio. And that's very important. So when you see something like the government shutdown, that's happening today, is that usable information for your portfolio? Is it something that the information is going to, that you need to take some sort of action? Can you do something about it in your portfolio? And if you're a long-term investor, if you're saving for retirement, my answer would be no. Okay, now let's say you're a government employee and you're going to be furloughed and you need some extra money. Yes, then that information might be usable. It should have been usable, a while back. Hopefully you planned for that. But if you didn't, then that information is usable. So you kind of see the distinction. Long-term investor out there saving for retirement or whatever, not usable information. If you work for the government, say you work for the Park Service, I think is one of the things that they're saying is going to be closed, might be usable information. You might want to have some more cash reserves. So that's the first thing we'll look at. Is it usable? Number two is it timely? And by that, I mean, are you going to use this information in the near future? The story could change by the time you're ready to use it. So for example, people that look at the price of stocks on a daily basis, that information is not timely. If they're not really planning to sell something that day, looking at that information is not timely, and it's a noisy habit. I mean, it affects you. And one of the things that this Sean Anker was saying is that even all the information that goes into your brain, even the irrelevant information, you may not think about it, but it ultimately affects our outlook and our actions, even if we don't believe it is. So if you flip on the TV, you say, hey, I'm a long-term investor, this stuff doesn't affect me. Sitting there for 3 hours a day, believe me, it does. And you will eventually start to absorb some of that information, and it will affect your actions. So that's the second thing, is look at it and say, is this timely? You know, is looking at the stock quotes 5 times throughout the day, is that information, you know, do I need it that fast? Is this going, am I going to make a decision, or is the information going to change by the time you need to take some action? So if it is going to change, then there's not a lot of point in looking at it right now. So I hope that makes sense. So the first two things we're coming up here to our second break. So just kind of recap to help you process at least the investment information, and frankly, all different kinds of information. The first thing is you want to look at, is it usable? Is this information, is it required for me to make any adjustments? And number two, is it timely? Is it going to change in the next 5 seconds? And if you can answer yes to those, then you don't need to pay attention to it. We'll be right back after a few short messages.